We bring in Brian Windhorst of the Mothership, ESPN senior NBA writer. How did we get to this point, Brian, with Giannis and the Bucks?
Not 100% sure where we are because one of the things that I've been talking to league executive types about in the last 24 hours is, do we think that this time the Giannis will actually go all the way and formally say it's time to trade me, because he's rattled the saber before. And one of the more fascinating stories that came out of this whole summer, and it didn't come out in the summer, it came out in October. And Shams Charania, my colleague at ESPN, reported it. But in August, Giannis talked to the Bucks, and different people can use different verbs here, and I'm not trying to like step on anybody, but he showed an interest in wanting to be on the New York Knicks, and to the point where the Knicks and the Bucks had trade talks. And I know what Doc Rivers said yesterday. He said Giannis didn't ask to be traded. Okay, he may not have said those words. I promise you, the Bucks, it wasn't their idea. Okay, and I know that it caught the Knicks by surprise, Dan. And you know how I know? Because like 2 weeks before, they signed Mikal Bridges to a contract extension, a really good contract extension, nice one. And it's not that they wouldn't have signed him or that they absolutely were going to trade him in that deal, but once you signed him to that, you can't trade him for 6 months. So if you thought that you were about to potentially enter a very important negotiation, you wouldn't take one of those guys off the table. So I think it caught the Knicks off guard too. And so what I think happened was it was Giannis's idea. Now, you can bring people on here and have them testify or whatever. It's fine. The talks took place, okay? And the important thing is Giannis watched what the Bucks did over the summer, which was do this crazy move. It was a $200 million move. They cut Dame, making $100 million in dead money. And then they signed Miles Turner for $100 million. So they took $100 million problem, which was a player in his 30s recovered from Achilles, and they made it a $200 investment for a Miles Turner, who is a quality player, just helped the team to get to the finals. An excellent, a high quality role player, but not a star player. He saw those moves, and then he said, "I have some interest in becoming a Knick." Okay, so that happened, and it didn't come out until October. And at that point, Giannis, they had signed his two brothers, and Giannis was playing for the Bucks and everything. But like that was a real indication of where Giannis's head was at. Here's the other thing: Giannis's family moved to Greece. If you know anything about Giannis, the family is extraordinarily important to him. It's one of the reasons why the Bucks have signed his two brothers, because they know how important it is to have his family with them. That he sent and he might have had 10 reasons to send his family to Greece. But again, these are actions that you're looking at going, so what the league is wondering is, knowing what happened in the summer, knowing about the other stuff, knowing that the team is not doing well, although they had their best win of the year last night. They beat the Pistons without Giannis. Will Giannis actually go forward and say, okay, I want to, because I don't think the Bucks are going to get there, Dan, because the Bucks are so mortgaged and so deeply invested in keeping him, and I actually don't blame them. And so that's really what the question is will Giannis take the next step besides the saber rattling that he's done before?
Why the Knicks?
Good question. He really, in all of the discussions from Giannis and from John Horst, their general manager, and Doc, no one denied that those talks took place. The Knicks certainly didn't deny it. And I know that they happened. And I will say that if you were in a vacuum choosing where to go, you would want to go to the Eastern Conference. I think you'd want to stay East. And so if you looked at the Eastern Conference and you said, well, where would I want to be as a player? Where do I think I can, make a big impact? Where could we win right away? Like New York rises to the top. You could make some cases for some other teams, Miami, for example, maybe Atlanta, maybe Boston, all that type of trade would be a lot more complicated. But like, if you go through that process, I could see how, Toronto would be an interesting team now. That's actually kind of an interesting team because, you know, um, international players seem to like Toronto. But I think, in August, I think New York made some sense. And it may not have made some sense from what the Knicks were in position to trade at the time. And I certainly don't think the Bucks were motivated to do it. Like they probably wanted everything the Knicks could possibly offer before they would even get mildly interested. But that's the other question: is if Giannis does. So there's really three questions that have been involved on my phone for the last 24 hours. One, will Giannis actually go to the point where he says, "I want to be traded," because he hasn't gotten to that point yet or before. Two, if he does get traded, will the list be longer than the Knicks, than it was just a one-team thing over the summer? And three, if Giannis has a list, let's say there's three teams, let's say there's six teams, whatever, do the Bucks have to do business with just his list? Because he does have 1 year left on his contract plus a player option. So next year you'd be faced with having Giannis in a walk year. So typically in that situation, you would, if you were trading for a guy, you'd want to know he is staying, especially if you're given a lot of stuff for him. But it's funny, Dan, as I've talked to people in the league, people don't necessarily think that would necessarily be true with Giannis. So I'm not sure. But those are the three questions and the topics that are going around the league right now.
I'm guessing Brunson would be off limits with the Knicks. That would be the only guy that'd be off limits.
Yeah, I would advise them. I don't have insight on, I don't have insight on that, but I would. So the challenge with the Knicks is they really don't have meaningful draft assets to give. Some of these other teams we could mention have their own draft picks and other teams' draft picks that they can offer. The Knicks don't have draft picks, so you would have to make it a player-based trade. And here's the thing about the Bucks that's important to understand: the Bucks, and this sort of backs up why they've doubled, tripled, quadrupled down. They don't control, I think, their next 3 or 4 drafts. They've either traded the pick away or they've traded the swap away. Certainly this year and next year, I know for sure. I think even 28 too. And so when you're in that position, you really can't enter into a trade thinking, well, we're going to rebuild, because you don't control your pick. And there's a few teams in the NBA right now who are in bad shape, who don't control their pick, and they're in hell. And so Milwaukee would probably have, if they, Milwaukee's probably doesn't want this to happen at all. But if they get to the point where they have to trade him, they're probably going to look to make a player-based trade. Or the draft assets that they're going to get are going to be third-party teams. In other words, if you do a deal with the team that you're trading Giannis to, and you're getting their picks for the next couple of years, that's not that exciting, because that team's theoretically going to be good. If that team has a third team's picks, yeah, you'd be interested in that, so that it doesn't rely on your performance or that team with Giannis's performance. But now you're threading a needle. So that's another reason why New York would make some sense. They have some players that the Bucks could get that would help them retrofit their team right now.
Talking to Brian Windhorst, ESPN senior NBA writer. Help me understand the Chris Paul situation of why it had to happen on the road in Atlanta.
Well, that seems crazy, and one of the things that Lawrence Frank, so first off, Lawrence Frank had this press conference yesterday, the general manager, the president, I think it's president is his title. And first off, he said, put all the blame on me, which maybe Lawrence wanted to do it, but I promise you it was not only him who wanted to do it. But doing it the way they did it, he said that they made the decision on Sunday, Dan. Okay, let's just take that for the truth. Why was he in Miami on Monday? They're starting a long road trip. And, Lawrence explained that the reason this happened in the middle of the night was because their flight was delayed by 5 hours, which it was. They didn't land in Atlanta Airport until 9:30. You know how long it is to get from Atlanta Airport to downtown. It doesn't take 5 minutes. They met at 11 o'clock and the meeting went several hours. So why do you do it at 11 o'clock? So like the actual functionality of the way they handled it is wretched. The decision, you've been around sports for a long time. When you have a player who is very vocal, who all of a sudden has a small role, it doesn't work. Chris Paul's whole career, he's been very vocal. He's been vocal with the officials. He's been vocal with his coach, the opposing coach. He's been vocal with the opposing star player, with his star player, with his role players. Imagine what he says off the court. You can just see what he says on the court. And when you're the star player and the point guard and you're playing all 82 games and your team is competing for conference titles or whatever, that's one thing. When you're doing that and the team is sinking and you're of a much smaller role, it doesn't work. I knew this 20 years ago when I started the NBA. This is a bit of a classic case situation. And you could say, well, then why did the Clippers bring him in knowing that he would have a small role and that this was possible? That's fair. And I would just say that of the Clippers' miscalculations this season, it's on the list, but there's a long list of Clippers miscalculations so far.
When do you feel like we'll get a true sense of LeBron's role with the Lakers? Is he a third option now? And, I guess the future of how long does he want to play, feel like he can play, and being maybe a third option for the Lakers and what role that plays.
It's an interesting set of circumstances that's happened because I thought LeBron was awesome last year. He was second team All-NBA. I thought he looked great. The Lakers had a disappointing end of the season. There was a bad matchup for them with Minnesota. But I thought that they really achieved in the regular season. They got the 3 seed. I mean, I know the difference between the 3 and the 6 was really tight, but they got it. And people were saying to me, "Why do you think this is it for LeBron?" And I'm like, no. Like, look at him. He's still one of the top 10, 15 players in the league. And then a couple of things happened. First off, he had 2 injuries, Dan. So he sprained his knee in the last playoff game against the Wolves. In fact, had they extended that series, I don't know if he could have played. He missed training. He was out for weeks. He's never missed a playoff game in all, 20 years in the playoffs. He's never missed a playoff game. I'm not sure he would have been able to play in the next game. So he had this knee injury. Then he hits the sciatica. So he has the most injured offseason he's ever had, which maybe isn't a surprise at age 40, but it's still completely new. Also, they get Luka. So LeBron was already having a great season. LeBron played well after Luka got there, but the Luka thing happens. Then he has the injuries. Okay, so these are 2 things that we've never seen. We've never seen him not be the A1A guy on his team. We've never seen him have off-season injuries before. Then his team without him plays really, really well. Absolutely never happened. Maybe his team has been able to keep their nose above water when he's been out, whether it's been for, a week or a month. They've never achieved. You've never looked at a team that has missed LeBron for multiple games and gone, man, they're doing great. And Austin Reeves is having a career year. So you've got this series of circumstances that he's never experienced before, not to mention not getting able to start a season, not having to have a training camp. So we are in completely unknown territory for him. It would be unknown territory if any one of those things was true. Now the whole menu is true. And by the way, he rejoins the team as the number 1 scorer in the history of the league, where the 2 guys on his team are in the top 10 in scoring. Reeves and Luka are like 1 and 9. I haven't checked it today. Maybe Reeves has dropped a little bit, but when he came back, I think they were 1 and 8. So this is a completely different situation he's ever done. And the team's winning. You're not coming in and boy, the team's struggling and now you get, so I think he is absolutely in a little bit of the deep end of the pool that he's never been in before. I mean, how long has it been since LeBron's been in a situation that he hasn't not only seen, but mastered? So this is awkward. And he's showing his age. The other night in that game was really a game where I really thought LeBron looked like an older player for the first time, where he wasn't getting lift. I mean, he had no rebounds, no steals, no blocks. That's never happened in 23 years, thousands of games. So you're asking a really relevant question. I don't think anybody knows. I think he's going through this day to day, trying to figure it out.
Would you be more surprised if he played another year or he retired at the end of this year?
I thought, even as recently as last spring, he has years left. I was not entertaining that this was going to be it, regardless of the contract, that's also something he's never experienced before, but is not really relevant. I don't think that's affecting his day to day. Now I'm just in the middle of I don't know. And I know it's an unsatisfactory answer. And I think LeBron has pretty much said the same thing. He said, I don't know. I think Rich Paul, his agent, has said, I don't know. I don't know. But that's a departure from me because I was in the camp of this guy could Tom Brady it. Like and he still could Tom Brady it. But if you watched him play last year, there's no way you said that's a guy about to retire.
Windy, thank you. I know you're busy. Thanks for joining
Thanks,
us.
Dan. Have a good day.
That's Brian Windhorst, ESPN senior NBA writer.